Well, it's a problem that began in a very simple way. As important projects sometimes began with just with a question, because they were rebuilding the cableway. That was an important amount of money to invest on the mountain, and they said, we are going to spend all that money. And we arrive to the mountain and we find the same condition, the same situation that we used to find before, and it used to look like a periphery of a city, very disturbed, with a lot of elements. And this was the question that arose our project. Since then we began to ask ourselves what could be done on this mountain and how could we introduce or help people to look with different eyes at the things that were there all the time. And that's how ideas like the promontory, like the geological observatory began, like the ludic path, the place of arrival, and some other project, some other single intervention. And this began with very much emotion. That's the way this project really came the best way. The Rival Plaza is important because it's the beginning of a story, of a tale. It's the end of the story, because you arrive at the mountain and from that place you began your excursion, your way to discover this site. And that's the same place where you find yourself again, or with your friends, when you leave the mountain. So it's a beginning and an entering. It's an entering into the project, it's a leaving a place and looking back and maybe smiling. So the plaza was important. We realized it with a particular drawing of using our stone, the granite, that is typical on these mountains, and with a drawing that begins with parallel lines to the building that start to open slowly in the two directions of the two most important paths. So it's an invitation to discover the landscape. On the mountain we have these few interventions that are very powerful, that are in dialogue with the surrounding atmosphere. And one of those interventions is the ludic path. And the ludic path came observing the vegetation around this mountain. And there is a kind of wood with habeas alba on the north part. These are dark woods, humid, with very few light coming through the branches. And then you keep on walking, you arrive at the part, you have the Fagus sylvatica. That's completely different. The trunks are grey, the ground is full of leaves. And then when you go on, you arrive at a certain part, there is a larix, a laricetum with Larix europea, and it's full of light colors, perfumes. And if you keep on this path, you come through another wood of Pice habeas, and at the end it's a very warm wood with Corylus species. So this was an opportunity to walk around this hill and discover the different dominants from our typical woods. And I wanted to combine this with the ludic moment. So we introduce 5 games that are not classical games taken from a catalog, but ludic moments to introduce you to experiment on your body, process from physics. And so you observe and you amuse yourself at the same time. Well, the promontory has an interesting detail to tell. It's about the study of the proportion. When we draw, when we work on a project, the scale is fundamental, and the model in scale 1:1 would be perfect. But this is not always possible, of course. But in this case, to find the right dimension, outside in the garden, we put plots. We draw on the pavement till we had the right proportion of this platform. And a curious detail is that the two main pylons have the same distance than two big fruit trees in my mother's garden. So this is the distance, and this is 44 meters is a distance we have here outside in the garden that we plot, and then we came to this proportion. Of course, there were many other details, like it was not possible to say how long this promontory should be. What can I see from this final platform? And I spent many hours on the mountain trying to find the right distance, measuring the shadow of the trees and trying to calculate how long this promontory should be. Finally, when it was built, the day we placed all these elements together with a very big helicopter, at the same day I could walk on this structure. It was no railing, nothing, but an open structure, and I could walk out, and then I came to the final point, and I said, yes, that's how I imagined this. And this was, of course, it was a great emotion. It's a result of a very critical observation of sites that you can find a little bit all over the world. They look all a little bit the same. At a certain moment you arrive, you have what we call a panorama. That's this metal plate with the name of the mountains. People sit there, read these names, eat something and go home. And in fact, you have no opportunity to introduce yourself, to discover the horizon. And that's what I wanted to do. So I said, why reduce an experience on the mountain simply by reading name of the mountains and not having another experience? And then I said, playing, and what beautiful it would be if you could walk through the trunks, the branches, the lichens, the needles, and arrive to a point outside and discover from there the landscape. And from this sentence began the project, from this promontory. And of course it was not so easy to build, as I'm telling now this story, because when you propose something new that has not been done nowhere, that you cannot show similar projects, so everything is research, then it's very difficult to convince and at the end to have the opportunity to build also. These are some signs. In fact, it's important. These are just a few engraved symbols in the pavement, and they are not so evident. Maybe you see them, maybe you don't. It's curious, sometimes children see these signs and the parents, they just look straight out. And then the children, they ask, Papi, what's this? What's the meaning? And so. And these signs, we worked with a biologist and asking ourselves, how can we transmit this moment going virtually through a trunk, through a tree? And we began with the DNA, the cell, the tissues, and so on, till the last sign is the universe. One between is about ecology, ecosystems, And these signs are very schematic, just to produce a kind of curiosity. So it don't gives you any answer. You don't see a sign and the answer written on the side. If not, you would walk like through a museum, that everybody at the end has the same meaning in his mind. And I want people to get curious, to observe, and to leave the place with some questions more than some answers. So when you reach the end point of this landscape promontory, if you want, you can find the explanation of these signs, and then you find some other stories about the horizon, just to help you, to give you an opportunity that your thoughts can voyage with you. Well, details are fascinating. They cost a lot of energy, and also there are results of inspiration and emotions. And but I would like to not to end an intervention on the physical perimeter of the site, whenever it's a landscape or even if it's a small garden, but to bring your thoughts in connection with what is out from this perimeter till the horizon, maybe farther if possible. So your thoughts can start to travel in another dimension. When you take the chairlift from Cardada and you arrive to Cimetta, 1,600 meters or above sea level, with a small walk of a few minutes you reach the geological observatory. That is a concrete platform cut from the existing rocks, and it's a way to introduce you to the history of the horizon. In this case, a geological history that tells about the movement of the plaques in some 100 million years ago. On this platform you find the samples from the rocks from the European plate and samples from the rocks from the African plate. These rocks have shifted about 60-70 kilometers around 90 million years ago, and they have a different age. 300 millions the rocks from the African plate, 90 millions the rocks from the European plate, and this is what the project tells you about this site. And a few symbols engraved in the pavement, like trilobites, like ammonite, like dinosaur, will bring you to these geological times and help you to understand what can be geological times, for us very difficult to perceive. We wanted to tell that the mountain that you have in front of you, in fact, at that time was 60 kilometers more on the left. So the mountain has moved, and the stones in front of you are from earlier geological time. They are around 300 million years old, and the rocks, not the stones, behind you are metamorph, so they are very young. They are around 90 million years old, and this was the story of this horizon we wanted to tell you. And today, when you arrive, also you have a place that begins to introduce you with the beauty of the horizon, but you quick ask yourself, what are these rocks? Why are they placed here? Why are they other far? what are the signs, what is the sign of the dinosaur has to do with this rock, or what has the birch leaf to do with the other rocks, the young ones. And so you have an introduction, maybe very superficial, of course, but at the same time very intriguing, that may be the beginning of something that can create more curiosity to yourself.